Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webcast, A Guide to CNC for Non-Technical People. My name is Brooke Bacon, Marketing Lead with GSI, and I am also very pleased to welcome our main presenter, Bill Rem, Database Lead with GSI. And now before we get started, I want to give you a chance to review our Safe Harbor Statement. And now for a quick overview of today's meeting, which will last about 60 minutes. First, we would like to take a moment to go over a couple of housekeeping items, as well as provide a brief company overview. Then I will turn it over to Bill to get into our main presentation, which will last about 40 minutes. Then I'll take a minute to go over some upcoming educational events, and then we will wrap up with a 10-minute question and answer session. If you would like to submit a question, you can do so through the questions panel at the bottom of the GoToWebinar console window, located on the right side of your screen. Please note that all questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. So if you would like to minimize your GoToWebinar console during the presentation, just click the right-facing arrow key on the top left of the console. Clicking the left arrow key will return the console so that you can input your questions. And now I'd like to give you a brief overview of GSI. GSI is a full-service J.D. Edwards consulting organization, and we are an Oracle Platinum partner that was founded in 2004 and now has over 100 employees. We have offices nationwide and are recognized on the Inc. 5000 list of fastest-growing companies in the U.S. We specialize in project consulting, managed services, and cloud and hosting services, with all of them backed with a 100% guarantee. We also provide a broad spectrum of business, functional, and technical consulting services for Oracle NetSuite, Oracle Cloud, Salesforce, and ServiceNow, and other enterprise applications as well. In addition, we are a product development company that has many popular products, including Genius, which is our advanced monitoring and performance analytics solution for J.D. Edwards or any business critical system on any platform. Genesis, which is our load and stress testing application for system design, validation, or expansion for J.D. Edwards or any web-based business critical system. G Shield, which is our comprehensive security solution for J.D. Edwards, including password reset and two-factor authentication. Rapid Reconciler, which allows you to effectively manage your inventory in transit and R&V reconciliation processes for any version of E1 or World. And we also have Rapid Approval, which is a Salesforce App Exchange solution that streamlines the approval request process. Thank you so much for your time, and now I'd like to turn it over to Bill for our main presentation.
Alrighty, I'm going to show my screen here.
Awesome. I can see it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Bill.
Yes, I am Bill Rem, and I have not only am I database manager, but I've been a CNC for 20 years. So if you're wondering why DBA is doing the CNC class, that's why. So we're going to talk about today CNC, and I'm going to tell you what that is and what is a CNC administrator, and how do you translate what the CNC is telling you. And one of the things about J.D. Edwards is that it's one of those softwares where there's not scripts and documentation and stuff that's going to explain how to manage and troubleshoot. I mean, there is documentation, don't get me wrong, but in order to effectively manage it and to troubleshoot problems, you have to understand how it works and what is going on underneath, because once you know that, then you can look at an error or see where something's coming from and immediately say, oh yeah, that's coming from the enterprise server or the database or the web server. So now this webcast is not going to make any of you an expert in it, and you may or may not understand everything in here, but at least you will have the information and the buzzwords and the overview of it to know where to look and what to ask and how to get things done that you need done in your day-to-day work. So let's move on. What is CNC? Configurable Network Computing, or CNC, is EnterpriseOne's proprietary blah, 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 blah. Now, I bet you thought I said this was for non-technical people. So it is. So I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna ditch that endlessly wordy definition. We're gonna try this again. CNC stands for, like I said, Configurable Network Computing. It's the concept on which JDE is built. It's an engine, really, that allows JDE EnterpriseOne to work on most hardware platforms, iSeries, HP, Intel, Sun, and most operating systems, Windows, Linux, Unix, IBM iSeries, also Solaris, and major databases. SQL Server, by Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, DB2 DB2 UDB, and you can have any combination and any number of these servers in a JDE environment. If you want a SQL Server database for non-prod and an Oracle database for production, you can do it. And nobody will know except your CNC administrator and the DBA. It's completely transparent to what the user will see, and it's not going to affect them at all. So now you can think of CNC as the technology pieces that run your system. It's the database, enterprise server, web server, deployment server, and server manager. That's your basic installation. You can see a little description there, which has a couple other servers in there. But I'm going to go through each one of these servers here in just a moment. So the database, the JDE application works for the database. Without a database, there'd be no reason to have JDE, or even a business for that matter. As I mentioned before, you can mix or match databases, although I would recommend staying on a specific product. It just makes it easier to maintain. You don't have to have multiple skill sets helping you out. If you're migrating, JDE is really cool here. It can do all the translations for you between any of the supported databases. That's a lot slower than using database tools, but it's built into the software. So you can move from iSeries to SQL Server, or SQL Server to Oracle, or anything, just by having them both connected to JD Edwards. Now, JDE can't leverage any advanced features on any database. It's built as generically as possible to enable these multiple platforms. So despite what you see in the application, JDE doesn't actually know, or whoops, sorry. Every time I hit the scroll, it goes forward. Despite what you see in the JDE application, JDE doesn't really know or even care what happens on the database as long as it gets the data it wants. So it doesn't know that you have a compressed table or that you have extra indexes that aren't included or anything like that. It's just asking for data and the database is delivering it. And as a slight aside, as database disaster recovery is near and dear to my heart, as with anything that controls your entire business, you need a way to recover from problems, and not just big world-ending problems, but also the little ones. Somebody ran the wrong report and mistakenly updated 1,000 records, or an administrator deleted a bunch of security and now nobody can get in. And you also need to consider how much time you can afford to be down and how quickly you want to recover from a disaster. The shorter those times are, the more complex and expensive the solution is. Even so, the most complex disaster recovery is cheaper than going out of business, because in 2017, of all the businesses that lost their data and did not have a disaster recovery plan, 90% of them went out of business. Now, if anybody is going to be at Collaborate, I'm actually going to be doing a seminar on database disaster recovery, and also how to recover from those little things, and a few other sessions. So look me up if you're at Collaborate. Now let's talk about the enterprise server. The enterprise server is sometimes referred to as a logic server or an app server, and it can be various hardware and platforms, like I said, and it contains all your path code information and your executable objects before 9.2. And it's where most of your applications will actually run. And some people will have more than one. One will just run your user objects, and then the other one will be for reports. And maybe you'll put a third one in just for something like GSI, or you can have as many as you want, and you can direct your processing to any one of those enterprise servers. The next one that you need is a web server, since JDE is web-based. For the most part, except for development, this can be, depending on your version, it can be on WebLogic, WebSphere, or Oracle Application Server, although OAS is not around anymore. If you're on an older version of JD Edwards, you may have that. This can also be various hardware and OS platforms, and it contains all of your Java executable code. It's also, some of your Java will run on the web server as well, and that's what every user that connects to JDE their Internet Explorer, Firefox, all that stuff goes to that web server. Then the web server communicates with the enterprise and database servers. And there are often more than one of these. One physical or logical server can have multiple web instances that all point to the same stuff. So for a big company might have a big 12 gig server with 3 web instances, and those would be load balanced. And then they'll have 3 other servers also with 3 instances, and because they might have 600 users that'll be using it at one time, and they need to have the redundancy in case one server dies, the other one can pick up the load. So as with databases and logic servers, you can have more than one, as many as you want. Now let's talk about the deployment server. Every installation has a deployment server, and it's kind of, depending on the company that you're at, the importance of the deployment server is variable in people's minds, but it is very, very important. It's where your source of all your application code is. Everything, every change that you make, every patch that you put in, every package you build, all of that is recorded on the deployment server in files and also in a database. An Oracle 12c Enterprise Edition database is on the deployment server. Now, it's only licensed for deployment server metadata, and it is free with JD Edwards. But that database is fantastically important. If you lose the deployment server, then you lose the ability to promote changes, to patch the system, and also to build packages and so forth. You need to have that deployment server intact, and it's got to be part of your backup strategy as well. Like I said, patching and development all go through here. Packages are built and deployed using the deployment server, and it might contain Server Manager if you want it to. And this is a Intel Windows-based server. Another important component of JD Edwards is used to be just installed in the deployment server, and now you can put it on a separate server. It's called Server Manager. I don't know how many people have been around as long as I have, but before Server Manager, everything that was done inside here was all done manually through the various installers, or if we were going to make configuration changes, we had to go directly into INIs, and in most cases, restart the system for any of these things to take effect. Now, there's still restarts needed for some things, but there's a lot of stuff you can do now inside Server Manager that it takes effect immediately, and obviously you have a lot more information coming in, a lot more control. And now normally a CNC Administrator uses this tool, and you can secure your Server Manager using the JD Edwards security. Sometimes, if you like, you can set up specific security for people who can go in and say clear the caches for your web servers to clear out security in case you're making changes. So there's different levels of access you can give to Server Manager. It's not a once you get logged in, you can do everything. You can change that. So you install all of your HTML instances. So a quick overview of a web server is that you install a web server, and then you install an HTML instance, which actually does the communicating with JD Edwards. So, when you go to any website in the world, you're connecting to a web server. If they have some type of application on the back end or databases, they may also have an HTML instance that does all the legwork to get to the data and the logic. And that's how JD Edwards works. So you also manage your software releases, tools updates, and things like that through here. If you want to upgrade your tools release from 9.1 to 9.2, it would be done through Server Manager. The Server Manager will distribute all the files it needs and apply it and restart it as needed. You can view all of your logging through Server Manager. It says central repository. Really, it's more of a central way to access these logs. Using Server Manager, you can filter the logs and also download the entire log to wherever you're at. Obviously, Server Manager, monitoring and control of servers is a huge part of it. Every web server, every enterprise server, everything on here, you can go in and see every process that's running, every user connected to every process, their web sessions, what they're doing, how long they've been doing it. You can kick them out. You can restrict things and many, many other abilities through Server Manager. And as I said, commonly installed on the deployment server, but there is also the option for a separate Server Manager now. Oh, one note on Server Manager is that you can have any version of Server Manager. It does not have to match your JD Edwards system. Now, if it doesn't match, then there might be functionality in Server Manager that would not be applicable to your system, but you can have 9.2 Server Manager on a 9.0 system. So don't worry about Server Manager matching your exact JD Edwards version. Now let's talk about tools releases. So JD Edwards has two main parts. There's application and there's the technology. And this separation is why CNC is needed. The CNC is the middleware piece that connects the application to the technology. Now tools releases are usually delivered every 6 to 12 months, and they contain new feature enhancements, new platform certifications, like if they're going to add in SQL Server 2016 that came out in a certain tools release 9.2.2, and any maintenance and things like that. And it can also include improvements to enhance your experience as an end user, and to maybe simplify the upgrade process of the implementation, and leverage the platform that it runs on and the infrastructure. As JD Edwards improves over the years, they're going to add functionality that's probably going to take advantage of more of the Oracle stuff than any other platform, even though they try to keep it as generic as possible. One of those examples is the JD Edwards in-memory applications, which require Exalogic and Exadata. So those could only be used on Oracle hardware. So these tools releases, when you put in a tools release, does not have anything to do with the application itself. So the business processes is not going to affect accounting or anything like that. It may affect how fast things process. It may change how it looks, but it's not going to affect the business processes. We also have the concept of multi-foundation. So in JD Edwards, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, there you can have multiple environments, one environment, and each one of them are a copy of each other. That they eventually get out of sync, but that's by design. But you can have development environment and a production environment, and then there's also normally a prototype and often QA, and you can have as many as you want. But EnterpriseOne is architected to allow for these multiple environments, and each environment can have their own different tools release on them. So you could, if you decide you wanted to upgrade to a new tools release, for example, you're on 9.0 and want to go to 9.2, you can just upgrade one environment, your development environment, and test it there. Do all your retrofitting, and then once you're comfortable with it, you can promote that tools release to other environments, or back it out, whichever works for you. Now let's talk about middleware. JD Edwards has its own homegrown middleware, which allows it to communicate across all of these different servers. They're called JDE Net and JDE Base. These are the two elements in the CNC architecture that allow the JDE applications to communicate all across these different things. So JDE Net handles communications at the presentation layer, what you see, and with other internal JDE applications. And the JDE Base is what provides that platform-independent multiple database access that allows you to have SQL and Oracle and iSeries running concurrently. So JDE Net and JDE Base are middleware software. They sit between everything and make sure that it all communicates correctly. So JDE Net's going to call your programs. JDE Base is going to pass the data between applications. They both have APIs as well. JDE Base specifically that allows this multi-vendor database access. And JDE Base uses basic structured query language, also known as SQL, however you want to pronounce that. And there's open APIs that can be accessed too. Now, what is a CNC administrator? Well, that's the person that manages JD Edwards and does installations and all of tools releases and whatnot. They're systems analysts that work in this field, JD Edwards, and they administer the system much in the way you might have a database administrator or an Exchange administrator or Salesforce or whatever. Based on the size of the company implementing a JD system, there might be one or more CNCs, and in some small companies, there's no resident CNC. In those cases, some of the day-to-day CNC functions, such as security and package builds and deployment is done by sometimes a JDE developer on the staff. And if they need to do something like a tools release or an upgrade or something high risk, they'll call in a third-party CNC like somebody from GSI to do some of those important, difficult long-term things. CNC is one of the 3 areas of JDE expertise. The others are the JDE developer who changes code, applies some of the patches, helps apply some of the patches if it needs retrofitting, and then the JDE functional analyst who is a business subject matter expert and a business process expert who also knows how JDE works. The CNCs are generally highly paid and extremely technical people. So that leads me to, what is my CNC telling me? What's an environment? Path code, OCM, OMW, are we just making this stuff up? You know, SAR, ESU, ASU update, SR, fat client. Did somebody just call me a fat client? No, I didn't call you a fat client. But all these things, you're going to hear these float around. So let me tell you what some of these are. And we're going to start with environment. CNC Speak 101. So an environment is a collection of pointers that indicate the location of data and the EnterpriseOne logic. So 3 simple questions are answered by an environment. Where is my data? What machine will process my logic? And what directory contains that object that's being processed? Normally, each environment has their own dedicated database, their own logic server, and their own separate code set. And when I say database, I'm really referring to database instance on SQL Server, and inside Oracle, it would be a different schema. Multiple databases are usually seen between prod and non-prod, and they can be broken down even further. So one great thing about JD Edwards is you can create environments that share one or more of these destinations. Maybe you want 2 separate levels of testing and quality assurance, but you don't need 2 copies of data to do that. So you can create 2 environments that use separate code, but they share the same data. And that cuts down on the amount of storage you need, because JD Edwards data, depending on the size of your company, you might have 100 gigs of data or a terabyte or 4 terabytes. And you don't really need to have multiple copies of 4 terabytes of data running around when it's not necessary. So let's go to, here's what machine will process my logic. Where's my data? Where's the directory that contains the object being processed? And so we're boiling it down to just the environment. So highlighted here is we've got PY920, DV, and pristine. So just 3 environments. So in this diagram, they have a testing server and a sandbox server. So if someone is signed into DV or PY, their code is executing on the testing server. So you can see here, PY goes to testing, and so does DV. So the code, the actual application code, is right there. Then the users logged into the pristine environments are on the sandbox server, right here. So the sandbox server, and some people have these sandbox servers where they can just go mess around and break stuff and they don't care about it. But see, what happens is the people over here, the users, let's see if I can draw a person. This person has no idea what's going on over on this side, because this is all done inside of JD Edwards right there. Now then, let's move on to the next slide. Now we have a set of objects. So the path code is the set of objects that defines the environment, and there are multiple path codes usually in a standard JDE setup. So a typical install will have development, prototype, production, and pristine environments, each defined with a unique path code, meaning that an application in production is going to be it's going to be the same to start with as one in prototype. But you can make changes to those applications and they won't affect the other environment. And a JDE customer needs to have multiple environments for various reasons. So if you're developing a new functionality, you don't want people in production to be seeing things changing while they're working day to day. That would just be bad. So you need to be able to do your work in development without affecting anybody else. So you can make this new functionality or test fixes in a separate set of objects without impacting the live production environment. Now, where is the data? The data sources, there's data sources in each environment, and these data sources point to the actual database. They have connect strings and other information necessary to connect to the databases. And in this example, we have the PY data. PY right here has its own data, so its own copy of data that nobody else can touch. But development and pristine, since development is designed to test functionality and pristine is used to compare against JDE shipped objects, the type of data in there doesn't really matter. So they both point to the same data on the sandbox database. Now, and remember the previous slide, we had DV and PY code pointing to different data. So, I mean, anyways, you can see how complicated this can get. If you can't afford to have all of these other databases or maybe multiple copies of code, you can have them share all this stuff. So how does JD Edwards know to do all of this? Where do you set this? This is done inside the Object Configuration Manager or the OCM. And don't confuse this with Oracle Configuration Manager. That's a different product for a different purpose. This defines exactly where the data is, where the objects are, where they should process, and so forth. It's the technical part of the environment that configures the processing of data at runtime without requiring any programming. So mappings are set up using data sources, which tell the system to find the data, where to find the data, and where to run the objects. And these options can be set by user, a role, per object, per environment, and by data source. So you could set a single person to get data from a specific table if you wanted to. Like if you're doing some testing and you wanted to, it's got a select in there somewhere, and in development it just doesn't work. So you decide you're going to point that one table to the PY table and see if it's a data related issue. And you can do that using OCM. You can even take one person and point everything of theirs to point to a different environment when they log into, so if they log into DV, you can set their data just for them to point to PY if you want to. You can also do that at a role level or point all JDE users to a new set of data. So if you set up a whole new database, for example, you're migrating from SQL Server to Oracle, you can set up all of your Oracle data sources and you'll have all your SQL Server data sources. And you've tested it all out, it's all worked, now it's time to cut everyone over to the new database. You go into OMW and you activate all of the OCM settings to point to the new Oracle database, and in 5 seconds they're now pointing at a whole different database, and they don't even know about it. Well, except for the fact that you called for some downtime and you broadcasted your whole company so you didn't surprise anybody, but otherwise they don't know the difference. So now on to our next acronym, OMW, or the Object Management Workbench, is the change management tool for JD Edwards. All modification to JD objects, menus, and so forth is all done in OMW in the context of a project. So you put your objects in a project, and then those projects are moved through statuses, which takes the code and puts it in other environments for testing. And it has other capabilities as well, including creating tables and indexes, copying tables, comparing code between environments, and much more. There's a couple different types of objects in JD Edwards, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which have different behavior based depending on what kind of object it is, where it goes. But we're going to move on now to how do these objects, these projects, how do you get these changes into environments? So you've made all your changes, everything works in DV, how does it go to PY? And that is through a package. A package is a group of EnterpriseOne objects which can be deployed together to the various servers and the FAT clients, which are web development clients. So there's two main types of packages, full package and an update package. Full packages contain everything you need to run EnterpriseOne. A full package is a complete set of objects and system tools for one path code. So you'd build a package for production, and that would just be for production. An update package enables you to update, add to, or refresh your existing full package with changed objects. And these are much smaller and easier to handle than full packages. So if you have made changes to one or two objects, you're going to use an update package. Now, there's a lot of flexibility with package deployment with multiple servers per path code. you can have different packages for different users, separate business lines, different languages, and so forth. So you might have one server for the US and one server for France. You'll build a package specifically for the US, but the package for the US doesn't need all the French language stuff. So you build a separate package with the French translations, and you send that to the French server. So you have a lot of ways to send out different types of data to different places. Now, packages have to be managed manually. They don't delete themselves. There's no automatic kind of expiration. You will have to go into the package management screen to delete these things. And when you delete a package out of the package screen, it removes the data from the deployment server and the enterprise server and the database that are all related to that package. So and that is a good reminder for me to say that when you build a package, it is taking up gigs of space on the deployment server and space on the database and the enterprise server, which you don't necessarily know about. So you need to develop a plan to manage these so you don't end up with hundreds of packages taking up all your space. All right, now let's talk about package deployment. Oh yeah, sorry, somebody mentioned my red lines there. I forgot about that. Thank you, Laurie, I appreciate that. Now let's deploy the package to the end users. This is how they get it. So you build the package. It doesn't actually do anything to anybody. Nobody gets to see it once you deploy it. They don't have, that doesn't immediately update anybody. You have to actually deploy it. And this is necessary. You have to keep the enterprise server synchronized with your workstations. The package build process is really, I think, the most important part of CNC. It's the only way that new custom objects and fixes to the existing software can be pushed out to the users. Even something as simple as a new version of a report, it's a new custom object that needs to be part of a package build before other users can see the report and run it. Now, OMW doesn't change anything that's not inside the object librarian. The object librarian is a table, two tables but it's mainly two tables that list all of the objects that exist inside JD Edwards. So, but only the OMW objects. It doesn't include things that only reside inside of a database. So if what you're modifying is data in a table, which are things like menus or task views, user-defined codes, UDCs, application versions, now those types of objects are updated immediately in the environment for which you're doing the development. So you don't need a package deployment in order for a menu to show up to somebody. It just shows up as soon as you do it. So when you promote the package from DV to PY, UDCs and menus are going to show up right away. Package deployment can't generate tables or indexes. That's a separate function within the OMW tool. Although I caution people never to generate tables or indexes using OMW or the single index generation tool. I have a whole webcast dedicated to that topic. You can get that on demand. I highly recommend that you watch that about indexes because you can easily cause hours and hours and hours of downtime by clicking generate indexes inside OMW. Let's see. Now let's go on to some more CNC speak. It's called SAR. So what kind of things go inside packages besides objects that you've been developing, that you've been working on with your developers? Well, still more objects, but when they come from Oracle, they're included what used to be called a software action request, or SAR. Now Oracle calls them bug requests, but the old lingo still sticks around. Now, as you probably know, EnterpriseOne is dynamic and continues to change as problems arise or enhancements are needed, like the 1099 stuff that's coming up. They need to have changes for that. Now, one SAR can include one or more JDE objects. And while they generally relate to the same function, it's not always a guarantee. Just one object might be a key component of a large part of JDE functionality. Like if the SAR had to fix something with the F0911 table, obviously that's going to affect a lot of things. Now, SARs are created mostly based on calls received from customers that are having problems or need additional functionality, and these SARs are then forwarded to Oracle's development group and turned into fixes that fall into two categories: tools releases and ESUs. And we talked about tools releases, so let's talk about ESUs. So an ESU is an electronic software update, and it affects a set of user objects. These are the applications themselves that people use, and could include many SARs. And the SARs are the bug fixes or the enhancements to the applications and reports. ESUs can be a one-off for just one thing. They could be a baseline ESU that are required for many other ESUs, or they could have dependencies that you need to install before you do a particular ESU. So one-offs can be applied by themselves, and baseline ESUs contain sometimes thousands of objects and fixes that all subsequent ESUs require. Dependent ESUs are similar, but they're smaller. They might only change a few objects in a specific area, but they're still required for some ESUs. And there are ESUs that require previous ESUs. You may get an ESU downloaded that requires a baseline ESU, and hopefully you have it, because I feel like baseline ESUs are almost as much work as doing a tools release or a minor upgrade to JD Edwards. Now, ESUs can be superseded if additional functionality is added or a bug is found. So if you've downloaded an ESU and done all kinds of work on it and it's been a few months, it might be a good idea to go check and see if it's been superseded, because they might have fixed something that you haven't come across yet. Now, all code changes require development effort, but ESUs can affect so many things depending on the size that you need careful examination of all the objects and extensive testing due to the interconnected nature of JDE objects. You may bring an ESU that is specific to, seems specific to what you're doing, but it includes maybe some of the little extra stuff in there that you're really not aware of, and part of this ESU deletes a table that Oracle has decided they're never going to use again. But your company is using that extra table to track something because that table was just there already. And as soon as that table is gone, now whatever that was is broken. So be very careful when putting in an ESU. Don't be laser focused on the problem that's being solved. Make sure you're looking at everything that the ESU is touching. Now, above an ESU, or kind of sideways to an ESU, but is an ASU. And these are the last few things I'm going to talk about. ASU is normally a collection of objects provided by a third-party vendor to enable a new functionality inside JDE. DSI, for example, provides an ASU that JDE developers use to integrate DSI into JDE. Smart Scheduler, similar. They include a set of JDE objects that they've developed that you will install into your system. The next thing is an update. An update contains all ESUs created since the initial release of the major JDE version. So the first major update for a release typically contains about 1,000 or more ESUs. And any subsequent update will be cumulative. So if update 2 comes out, it's going to include those 1,000 and then the next 1,000. And every ESU since it was released. So applying a major update requires the same amount, usually the same amount of effort as a full upgrade of JDE. So these are normally only applied during installs and upgrades. One thing about ESUs, and I don't know how many people have experience with this, but Oracle pushes out dozens of changes a week, maybe hundreds a month, and 1,000 a year, and they may not relate to anything that you're doing. So when you're talking about updating JD Edwards code, you want to, normally when you get a patch from a client or from a software, you want to apply it right away. Windows does it. The Oracle critical patches that come out, they say you should apply this. But with JD Edwards, it's different, because a lot of these ESUs, they don't really add anything for you, and they may fix something that is not broken or something that you just don't use. So the general rule of thumb for ESUs is don't install an ESU or an update unless you are actually having a problem that is addressed by that ESU. And what that means is that you're not going to be out there trolling the ESU site trying to find things that apply to what you're doing. You're going to wait for something to be an issue. And I know that sounds weird, but there are just too many ESUs to look through that fix too many little things. You may find an ESU that fixes some problem that nobody has even noticed ever, but you're saying, oh, well, this is part of our functionality that we do. But it turns out applying that ESU requires major testing and changes the whole way that works, and you end up creating more problems than you were trying to solve in the first place. So be careful when applying any kind of changes to JD Edwards that come from Oracle. Next thing I want to talk about is if you have a problem with Oracle, if you have a bug that you found or you need to learn something more, you're going to open a service request with Oracle support. Now you need to have Oracle support. You need to pay for that in order to use this information. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it. And even if you have hired a third-party person like GSI to help you manage your system, they would not be able to look this stuff up on your behalf. That would be a violation of the license. So you'll need to have Oracle support. And you can open service requests. You can see everything else that has transpired, look for bug fixes, documentation, and everything through Oracle support. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the FAT client, and it's actually nowadays called the Web Development Client. But the reason it's called the FAT client is that 20 years ago, when JD Edwards EnterpriseOne was a new thing, they were just clients. You could only access JD Edwards through a workstation. But then as the web came on, we had thin clients, which were the web users, and then so we called, and that was the terminology at the time. Thin clients were the new web-based clients. So then we just called the Windows one fat clients because they had gigabytes and gigabytes of data and code that was needed to run the application. So we still to this day, us old salts, call them fat clients. We're not calling any clients fat, so I apologize if anybody thought that, but it's not true. We might have some fat consultants out there. I used to be one, but I've been working out, so that's all good. But the official terminology is Web Development Client. And with that, Brooke, I have completed the webcast, and I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. That was great. Let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see it okay? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I can see your screen.
That's okay. That's okay. No worries. Thank you so much, Bill. That was great. I just want to cover a few follow-up items, and then we will move into our question and answer section of the webcast. Our webcast today is a part of GSI's free ongoing educational webcast series on JD Edwards, and our current webcasts are listed on the screen, and it changes every day. So to view our most up-to-date schedule, just go to getgsi.com/webcast. And we provide an extensive free educational resource center for the JD Edwards community, and that includes our weekly educational webcasts, our monthly newsletter, which is called the GSI Insider, and our online resource center where you can access our on-demand webcasts, white papers, and we also offer on-site and virtual workshops. So if you would like to sign up for our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts or our monthly newsletter, you can go to create an account to access our resource center. You just go to getgsi.com, go to platforms on the main menu, and then you can select the platform here, and then you can select the appropriate link on the left. All right, I see we have a few questions submitted. I just want to remind everyone that if you would still like to submit a question, there still is time, and you can do so using the question panel in the GoToWebinar console window on the right side of your screen. And if you minimized your console earlier, please just click the left-facing arrow key to redisplay the questions panel. Okay, Bill, we've got a couple questions here. Let's see. First question is from Sarah, and Sarah says, we are on 9.2 and have already identified several bugs that require a big baseline ESUs we didn't get when upgrading, so we haven't done anything. Will there be an update for 9.2 like there was for 9.0?
Yes, actually, 9.2 update 2 went live on October 23rd of October 13th. Let's see, hang on, let me make sure of that right. 9.2 update 2. Let me go to the release notes real quick. Bear with me. It is out. So the bottom line, it is out right now. So I don't know the exact date. I think it was at the end of 2017. So so if you need to apply that, then you can definitely start downloading it and getting it in there.
Okay, great. Thank you. And our last question today is from Mark, and he just asked if this recording will be available online. And we will send out a recording or a link to our resource center where you will be able to access the recording and also receive a copy from of the presentation from today. So that appears to be the end of our questions for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for your questions, and thank you so much, Bill, for your answers as well as the great presentation. And just as a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit, and you will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website where you can access the recording from today's webcast, as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do a drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone that attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and we will notify the winner. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to Bill or myself, and our contact information is currently listed on the screen. And we want to thank you again for all attending, and Bill for your presentation. And please let us know if you have any questions. We hope that you guys have a happy holiday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Bill.